Chapter 12. Who sets the course? Seated on the airplane, I closed my eyes. The plane's course was set with precision. It was headed for Moscow. The course of the rest of my life was still to be set. But I was thinking more about entrepreneurs. Many people today still tend to regard entrepreneurs as people who are constantly working out business deals, having amassed their initial capital by some illegal means, and multiplying it at the expense of those around them. Naturally, just as in any other segment of our society, there are entrepreneurs and then there are entrepreneurs. However, having been right at the center of the entrepreneurial life in our country from the very beginning of perestroika, I can tell you that the majority of the first wave of post-communist entrepreneurs made their initial capital by looking for unorthodox solutions for producing new merchandise or goods which had been in short supply, and finding more efficient ways of structuring manufacturing operations. It was a peculiar characteristic of Soviet and Russian entrepreneurs to make money from scratch. In other words, starting from nothing, not even with credit. After all, the first wave of entrepreneurs had no access to privatized factories that the next wave enjoyed. They had to fly by the seat of their pants and hope they would be lucky. And they did make money from scratch. By way of proof, let me cite an example from my own experience. Chapter 13. Money from scratch. Back before perestroika, I was in charge of a small unit in a photographic collective. It included lab technicians and a number of roving photographers. Everyone had both a salary and additional perks, which allowed us to make a fairly decent living for the time. Each member of our unit received a percentage of the total profits. Naturally, we wanted more. But for that, we had to find more clients. I managed to hit upon a solution. Anyone who wishes is free to copy it even today. One day, I was traveling along the highway and I got a puncture in my tire. While getting the tire repaired, I watched the cars passing by one after another and thought to myself, if only we could give all these drivers a chance to have their photo taken, there would be a huge profit to be made. It took me but a few minutes to formulate a plan of action in my head, a plan whose realization in practice would soon quadruple our unit's profits. It worked this way. One of our photographers would stand at the side of the highway with a camera. He had two assistants with green armbands bearing the SB insignia, which is the common designation for service industries in Russia, and brandishing batons like those used by the traffic police. Motorists would stop thinking it was the green or some other patrol, the green referring to the environmental patrol. Upon learning that it was simply a photo service being offered and that nobody was about to pounce on them or fine them or inspect their vehicles, drivers were happy to stand in front of their car or next to the license plate and have their picture taken. They gave the addresses where they would like the photos to be sent COD. The license plate had to be showing just in case there was a mix-up in the address. We ended up offering this service on all the major highways leading to Novosibirsk over a 6-month period. Then, more and more, we started encountering motorists who had already used the service. But during these 6 months, our unit managed to realize a fairly decent income. Later, I thought of starting a photo campaign to take pictures of residential homes, adding postcard phrases like, "I live here," "Home sweet home," etc. People from our unit took pictures of thousands of houses. The demand turned out to be enormous. It got so that the photographers didn't bother asking which residents wanted it. They would simply walk along and take pictures of every house on the street. A few days later, the Postal Service would deliver the photos to each dwelling and collect payment. People would send these snapshots to their children. Many said the pictures inspired their children to come home for a visit. Before long, the collective started having problems paying the members of our unit their salaries, which, in the opinion of the management of the day, had exceeded all reasonable bounds. But there was little they could do about it, since everyone in the collective was entitled to an equal share of their unit's profits. During the early days of perestroika, our unit detached itself from the collective and formed an independent cooperative. I was chosen its first chairman. This way we enjoyed greater freedom of movement. We had the opportunity to gather some seed money together and expand the scope of our operations. I began to think about new ventures to increase the company profits. One day, I happened to have a conversation with an acquaintance of mine who worked at the Institute of Theoretical and Applied Mechanics. He was complaining that wages were being delayed or not paid at all, and that the lab unit was being threatened with dissolution. Where could they go? What could they do? They weren't needed by anyone, it seemed. Quote, "What did your lab do before?" I asked him. Quote, "We made thermal gauge tape. Nobody needs it anymore." Quote, "What's it used for?" Quote, "All sorts of things," he replied. He took a piece of black tape out of his pocket and handed it to me. "See for yourself," he said. I took the piece in my hand, and all at once it turned green as I fingered it. I even threw it on the ground. Quote, "What kind of junk is that? It turns green. Now I've got to wash my hands," I told him, to which he replied, "Don't worry, it simply changed color from the warmth of your hand. It's supposed to react to changes in temperature. If the temperature of your hands had been above normal, it would have turned red. The green color indicates a normal temperature." The concept took off quickly. Our company began producing flat thermometers and stress indicators. A piece of tape was stuck onto a sheet of cardboard with bright colored squares, each with a number beside it, indicating degrees of temperatures, and presto, a new product was born. We had it distributed through the state warehousing agency to many regions of the old Soviet Union. Our production staff increased and everyone made a fairly decent living. Our seed capital was growing. The lab also came out of the red since a share of the profits accrued to the Institute. Our cooperative acquired new equipment along with 2 vehicles, and then something happened which gave us an incredible boost. One afternoon, I arrived at the company and noticed both our telephones in use. My secretary was on one of them, listening and taking down notes. The other telephone was being manned by the cleaning lady. No sooner had one of the phones been hung up than it started ringing again. At one point, my secretary managed to tell me, quote, "They've been ringing off the hook for over 2 hours already. One call after another, nonstop. Everybody's asking for our thermometers and stress indicators. One fellow cursed us, calling us pre-perestroika dimwits. If we were willing to raise our prices, he said, he would buy them from us wholesale at the higher price. They're all placing bulk orders. They're even ready to give us advance deposits." During the early days of perestroika in our country, if you remember, there was quite a proliferation of manufactured kitsch on the market. Plastic clip-on earrings, posters and calendars featuring semi-nude girls. Everyone snapped these things up like crazy. Against that background, what we produced looked like a super novelty, but after 6 months of production, sales suddenly took off with a bang. Something had happened, but what? It turned out that on a TV broadcast the previous night, the foreign affairs correspondent was commenting on how innovative the Japanese were and showed a Japanese stress indicator as an example. It looked just like ours. It was then that I realized for the first time the power of advertising and the nature of the beast, which we call luck. Our staff began working 3 shifts a day round the clock. We hired workers to do the packing, trimming, and finishing in their own homes. Profits steadily increased. We acquired a small passenger ship. I also decided to manufacture seeding equipment for independent farmers. I even chartered a large cruise to organize business tours and trade expeditions to the regions of the Russian far north.